All right, let's jump right in. I want you to imagine something. Imagine you grew up with two dads. Not one, but two. One is a super educated PhD, the other, he's an 8th grade dropout. Now, what if they gave you the exact opposite advice about money, about life, about getting wealthy? That's the whole setup for Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it all kicks off with one incredible contrast.
And this just perfectly frames the entire story, doesn't it? On one hand, you've got Poor Dad's way of thinking, the love of money is the root of all evil. It's what many of us have heard. But then on the other side, you have Rich Dad's total flip of that idea. The lack of money is the root of all evil. You know, growing up caught between these two, it forced the author to really think, to compare these ideas, and to choose his own path.
So let's actually meet these two guys. Poor Dad was Robert's real father, a brilliant man, highly respected, the head of education for the state of Hawaii. And Rich Dad, that was his best friend's father. He was an entrepreneur who never even finished middle school, but, and this is the crazy part, he would go on to become one of the wealthiest men in all of Hawaii. And here's where you really see the difference in their thinking. Poor Dad's advice is the classic path, right? It's what we tell our kids, the employee path. It's all about finding security, but Rich Dad's advice, well, that's about ownership. It's about creating jobs, not just looking for one. It's such a small change in the words, but it's a massive, massive difference in mindset.
This one is so important. For Rich Dad, saying I can't afford it was just mental laziness. It literally shuts your brain down. End of story. But asking, okay, how can I afford it? Well, that's a workout for your brain. It forces you to hunt for solutions, to see possibilities. It just cracks your mind wide open to creative financial thinking.
So how does this whole journey even begin for a 9-year-old kid? Well, like a lot of big life changes, it started with a really painful moment, a moment of feeling left out. Oof. Can you just imagine hearing that as a kid? That single comment, being labeled a poor kid, it just lit a fire in him. He marched right home to his dad and asked that simple question, can you tell me how to get rich? And that moment, right there, was the spark that ignited his entire journey into financial education. So what was his first brilliant business idea with his best friend Mike? Well, they decided to literally make money. I'm serious. They set up this whole production line in the driveway, melting down old lead toothpaste tubes to forge counterfeit nickels. Was it creative? Absolutely. Was it, legal? Not even close.
Now, when his dad found out and shut the whole operation down, he didn't yell at them. Nope. Instead, he dropped this piece of wisdom on them. See, the lesson wasn't about the illegal, failed business. It was about the incredible power of just doing something. They had taken action, which is way more than most adults ever do. And that was the real.
So, Robert and Mike took his dad's advice and went to see Rich Dad to learn how to actually make money. And Rich Dad, well, he made them a very interesting offer.
No books, no lectures, no sitting in a classroom. Rich Dad's method was super simple. You learn by doing. He said if they wanted to learn from him, they had to work for him, and the lessons would come from the work itself. So what do you think they did? They took the deal.
And their grand salary for this amazing mentorship? Get this, a whopping 10 cents an hour. Every single Saturday for 3 hours, their job was to dust canned goods in one of Rich Dad's stores. I mean, even back in the 1950s, a dime an hour was just insulting.
As you can probably guess, the excitement did not last long. The work was mind-numbingly boring, the pay was a joke, and Rich Dad hadn't taught them a single thing. He hadn't even talked to them. Robert was angry, he felt used, and he was ready to walk. And that, right there, was exactly what Rich Dad had been waiting for.
So the big confrontation happens, and this becomes the first real lesson. Robert just storms in, ready to demand a raise or quit, basically accusing Rich Dad of being a greedy crook who was breaking child labor laws. And that was Rich Dad's response. No anger, no excuses, just a simple, powerful observation. He basically held up a mirror and showed Robert that his anger, his frustration, his need to blame someone else, that was the exact same trap that kept most people stuck in jobs they hated for their entire lives.
And this is where the light bulb goes off. Rich Dad explains that the low pay, the boring work, that was the lesson. He said, life pushes all of us around. Some people just give up and let life push them. Others get mad and they push back at their boss, at their job, at their spouse. But a few people, they learn from the push. They realize that life is trying to teach them something important.
He went on to explain that most people's lives are run by two really powerful emotions. The first one is fear.
You know the feeling, right? It's that fear of not having enough money to pay the bills. It's the fear of getting fired.
And it's that fear that gets you out of bed every morning to go to a job you probably don't even like. Then, once the paycheck hits your bank account, the second emotion kicks in: desire. You see all the cool things you can buy, and a pattern starts.
You get up, you go to work, you pay bills, you buy stuff, and you start all over again. And that endless loop, a cycle fueled by fear and desire, is what Rich Dad called the rat race. People are just terrified of breaking the pattern, always thinking that more money will fix the problem. Spoiler alert, it never does.
So after laying out this trap that so many people fall into, Rich Dad finally delivered it. The single most important lesson about money he wanted these two young boys to learn. The one idea that would completely change how they saw the world from that day on.
And there it is. That's the whole game, the fundamental shift in thinking. It's not about working harder and harder for a bigger and bigger paycheck. It's about learning how to build or buy things, assets that make money for you. It's about escaping the rat race entirely by finally understanding how money actually works.
When you boil it all down, the real difference between Rich Dad and Poor Dad wasn't how much money they made. It was their mindset. It was about their financial education, or lack thereof. Poor Dad believed in job security. Rich Dad believed in financial freedom.
So, with this huge lesson finally sinking in, Robert was excited. He was ready to keep learning. He figured he'd pass the first test. But Rich Dad? Oh, he had one last twist up his sleeve.
He looked at them and said, "Get back to work, but this time I will pay you nothing." He was forcing them to completely break free from the idea of working for a paycheck. Now they had to use their brains, their creativity, to spot opportunities to make money that had nothing to do with an hourly wage.
And that's really the question this whole story leaves us with, isn't it? Most people spend their entire lives chasing the paycheck, and they often miss the lesson. But Rich Dad's whole philosophy is that the lesson, the education, that's what holds the real power to build lasting wealth. So let me ask you, which one would you choose?